have three members for this panel, and all basically I think will be very pleased with the grouping we brought together. We first have Mr. Anthony Orlando, who's President and Chief Executive Officer of Covanta Holding Corporation. He's a board member of the holding company, and he's listed on the New York Stock Exchange and included in the Russell 1000 Index. Covanta is the largest energy from waste company in the world annually, generating enough electricity to power over 1 million homes, I believe that number is, while processing approximately 20 million tons of municipal solid waste. Covanta has operations in Asia, Europe, Canada, and 18 states throughout America, and employs over 4,000 people. Under Mr. Orlando's leadership, Covanta increased its revenues from $600 million in 2004 to $1.7 billion in 2008. You like big numbers on this. Very impressive. Furthermore, Covanta has become a founding reporter of the Climate Registry and an active member of the American Council on Renewable Energy and the Global Roundtable on Climate Change. Many of his plants and operations and facilities have won many awards all over the world. He is currently a member of the Leadership Council of the Institute for 21st Century Energy, and he's on the Villanova University's Energy Engineering Advisory Board. I should point out he is a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Villanova and an MBA in Finance from Seton Hall. Our second panelist is Julie O'Brien. She's the Corporate Sustainability Manager for Air Products. She's responsible for integrating sustainability into the company's business and work processes and works closely with Air Products Sustainability Council and senior members to develop and achieve the company's sustainability strategy. Ms. O'Brien joined Air Products in 1986 from their career development program, something I think several of our alumni have gone through at Air Products. She subsequently moved to Allentown and became as a process engineer supporting chemical manufacturing. And since then, she's on the Corporate Environmental Health and Safety Department, and she managed global regulatory compliance and product risk assessments. We did make an exception. She did receive her BS in chemical engineering from Notre Dame, but since Air Products is so associated with Villanova, we're making an exception. And she did see the light and has an MS degree in civil engineering from Lehigh University. Our last speaker is Carl Schmidt. As the Vice President Strategy of Strategy and Innovation of Johnson & Johnson, Carl Schmidt guides the development and deployment of coordinated strategies and performance metrics across the supply chain. He also identifies opportunities for increased collaboration and innovation, interacting with external networks and industry experts to enable fact-based decision-making and better knowledge management. In prior positions, Mr. Schmidt led J&J Business Improvement Services, focusing on accelerating high-impact business solutions across the corporation. He joined J&J Corporate in December 1997 as Vice President Worldwide Environmental Affairs, and his compliance has had responsibilities for leading their environmental management strategy, focusing on beyond compliance initiatives. I would say that Carl owned his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, you see the theme here, and Master of Science in Environmental Engineering from Villanova University, and he's also on the College Advisory Board. And I guess we'll start off with Anthony.
Well, thank you, Robert. Just going to do a brief introduction of Covanta, particularly in light of the other panelists here with Air Products and J&J. I think are probably well known to many of you. Covanta, as Robert said, is let's see, we did get it up there. So Covanta is the world's largest energy from waste company, and what is that? We take regular household waste and we convert it to electricity through combustion processes in facilities such as the one that's shown up here. This particular facility happens to be in Fort Myers, Florida, but in fact, Covanta has facilities all around the country, including one that services Villanova University, right up the road on 476. So for the waste that's not recycled today, we're going to recycle it into energy probably a couple of days from now when it goes to that facility. So we think what we provide is a sustainable service in of itself, because we're preventing waste from being put into the landfills. We are also providing good, clean, renewable electricity. In fact, Covanta's facilities are providing about 8% of the nation's renewable electricity today. So not something that you hear about as frequently as wind or solar, but it is part of the solution. And clearly when it comes to energy and renewable energy in particular, I think there's no question that we need a whole variety of solutions, and we think this is part of the answer. The one other benefit to what we do is it actually avoids greenhouse gases. We actually are avoiding methane. When you bury garbage in landfills, it generates methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas, and in fact 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So there's a number of sustainable benefits inherent in our business. The facility that's pictured here in Fort Myers, Florida, is actually the first energy from waste facility in the U.S. that's actually selling carbon credits on the voluntary markets. We do have a global reach, but I think as one of the panelists in the discussion that I heard earlier said, unless you've got 2/3 of your revenue coming from international fields, you're not really global yet. And I happen to agree. Whether the magic number is 2/3, or half, whatever the number is, Covanta is about 15-20% of its revenue base international and 80% in the U.S. We're clearly not to the point where we're a global company yet, but that's where we're headed. And I think most businesses that are focused on the long term are recognizing that you've got to go beyond the borders here in the U.S. And I would think that within 5 to 10 years, Covanta will be about 50% of its revenue coming from international markets. We were asked to talk about a very wide topic here today, and so I'll just try to touch on a couple of themes. I wonder if I do that so I can see it. No?
Well, that's when
that's
when it got down, it got small. So
the theme of global operation and leadership and sustainability. We were kidding before that we haven't been asked to debate world healthcare and poverty, but other than that, we've kind of covered the spectrum. I think one of the very fundamental challenges, when you look at the core, certainly the basics of sustainability, it's about your governance policies, your people and your leadership, but then it's about balancing. It's about balancing the near term and the long term and the factors that are influencing. I look at the near term challenges as a public company CEO. We are under pressure every quarter. That's the way it is. That is the way it is for every company, and it's not just publicly owned companies. If you're a private company that's owned by private equity, the pressures are just as intense. They're monthly. If you're a small business entrepreneur, you've got payroll to meet. You've got near-term pressures, and so you have to perform in the near term. It's just an essential, because if you don't, you won't be here to create a sustainable business. You also have to be engaged in the community. You have to be out there. You have to be involved. Whether it's events like this, whether it's different community affairs, you have to be part of the community that you're serving, not just for the greater good, but because that's how you stay in touch. That's how you know what's going on. That's how you get a perspective of what the trends are. It gives you an opportunity to shape the trends, but also to see the trends. You've got to invest in the long term. You have to be balancing constantly, whether it's investing in training, whether it's investing in property, plant, and equipment, whether it's investing in development to drive new revenue, and striking that balance between that near-term performance and those investments that you have to make to create a sustainable business. And then the final element that I look at is the strategic planning. Again, the information that you can pull in from being engaged with the community, but it's having the discipline and the processes in place to put together a strategic plan for whatever business you might have, or really whatever the enterprise is, to be thinking about the long term. Because if you're not spending time to think about the long term, you're sure not going to be able to get there. And you have to be in your planning and your strategic process. You have to have a balance between a consistency and adaptability. If you change your plan every year, well, it's not a particularly good strategic plan. If you have to change it all the time, you probably didn't really come up with a very good plan the first go around. But if you're so rigid and stuck in a plan, and you can't adapt to the things that are going on around you, and we live in a world today that things change so rapidly, you have to be prepared to adapt. And so having the processes in place to do that. So I think it really does come down to that balance when you're looking at a sustainable organization, and how you balance those long-term benefits with the pressures on short-term profitability and performance, whether it's safety or environmental or all those other short-term demands that we have.
Great.
Julie?
Thank you. And thank you for having me here today, Robert. I appreciate it, especially coming from Notre Dame instead of Villanova. Where? Where's that? Here? Yeah, my husband's actually a Notre Dame graduate too, and he suggested a few jokes that I thought would be totally inappropriate. So I'm going to go right to my content. So we're going to talk about a little bit about who is Air Products and then what we're doing in sustainability. So I'm glad you've heard of Air Products. Actually, both of you have. Well, we're a very large company, $8 billion in sales. We're in about 40 countries worldwide. We have 600 facilities globally. But we're a business-to-business company, so we provide products to other industries. And so if you have heard of us or you've seen us, it's probably because you've seen one of our trucks driving down the road. We have one of the largest fleets in North America. We travel about 50 million miles a year. Our tank trucks do, carrying liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen, and other products. So that's how most people know us. We're known for our innovative culture and our operational excellence. We've actually been on this sustainability journey for a while. In fact, some people like to say that our company was founded on a very sustainable concept, which was build the plant for the customer on the customer's site or right next to it so you can avoid the transportation. You just pipe the products right over. So you save on fuel, save on energy, and you save on those emissions. And that's still a model that works very well for us today. We also are very well known for our safety culture. We have one of the best safety rates in the chemical industry. And so we're very proud of that. And it's something that we keep working on every day, all the time. So we're here to talk about sustainability. There's lots of definitions of sustainability. Typically, people talk about the 3 pillars of sustainability: people, planet, profits. And I'm going to share with you what Air Products' definition of sustainability is. And this little graphic, this little circle above me, there's a lot more to it. It goes out further and further, but for your eyes, I didn't want to have the whole thing up here. But basically, sustainability is long-term business value. Okay, we'll just stop there. Long-term, as Tony talked about, you have to be looking long-term, but you also have to be considering your short-term performance as well. And it's a balance that you have to strike. So it's long-term business value through understanding the environmental and social challenges. What are the most pressing challenges facing us today? Well, and for the future. By the year 2050, it's expected the population of the world will be about 9 billion people. Okay, it's about 6.8 right now. How are we going to take care of all those people? Currently, we use over, I think it's 4 quadrillion BTUs of energy per day on a global basis. Huge, huge amounts of energy. It's good for you.
It is.
Yes. And then water. We don't have that much of a water shortage here in the U.S. There are pockets that do. But globally, about 20% of the population doesn't have enough drinking water. Thousands of people die every day because they don't have access to clean drinking water. So there are some very pressing challenges out there. And so we need to understand those as a company and then understand how we can help that, how we can support our customers to be more sustainable. And I'm going to show you some examples next about what we're doing in that particular area. So while we're helping our customers, we're also trying to manage our footprint. We are the largest hydrogen manufacturer in the world. Hydrogen is used to remove sulfur from crude oil, which makes your gas burn cleaner. So that's great. But it generates a lot of CO2 in the process, and we're one of the largest CO2 emitters in the United States. So what we continuously try to do is improve our operations, make them more efficient to reduce our CO2 footprint. But overall, even though we're emitting CO2, the benefits to the environment, whether it be reduced sulfur dioxide or your car runs better, your catalytic converter runs better, so there's less particulate matter, less NOx, that helps. So it offsets. So we have to look at things at a very large basis. We've set goals to reduce our impact on the environment in 6 particular areas. Those are in energy conservation. We set a goal to improve or reduce our energy consumption by 7% by 2015, and that was from a 2007 baseline. Now, we talk a little bit about the financial benefits of sustainability. That to us is worth about $140 million a year. So there's definitely savings there for us. We've also set goals in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, reducing our water consumption, hazardous waste, our emissions from our facilities, our chemical emissions, and also the emissions from that fleet that we have that is actually global. So we're doing a lot to reduce our footprint on the world. And finally, we're very, very involved in our communities. We want to be a positive influence where we have facilities, we focus our philanthropy in several areas such as education, the environment, and the arts. And we spend about $5 million a year, and our employees during their work hours are encouraged to go out and to spend time working in their communities. So we're very, very concerned about where we are and what our folks are doing. Now, from a business perspective, we look at sustainability, and you might talk a little bit about this too, but it's kind of a journey, or has been a journey for us, where I really focused first on risk management, which is the whole concept of reducing your footprint, because that footprint costs you money, and it exposes you to potential issues. So that's a risk management aspect. But the other aspect of it is this whole opportunity for growth and new products and helping your customers. And so I just want to talk about a few of the things that we're doing. The World Business Council on Sustainable Development said that we're not going to be able to make this world sustainable just by improving the efficiency of what we're doing now. What we need to do is innovate. So that's what we do with our engineers and our technicians at Air Products, is really try to make progress through innovation. So in terms of hydrogen, we're really continually working to optimize our hydrogen processes, and we're also looking at renewable sources for hydrogen production. So where else can we get it that's more sustainable? We're developing technologies for carbon dioxide capture and sequestration, and we've got a number of projects that are ongoing for that. In fact, some of the largest carbon capture and storage projects in the world are being supported by Air Products right now. We've developed ceramic ion transport membrane technology so that we can make oxygen in a more efficient manner. Oxygen is very important. A lot of our oxygen goes to hospitals to help patients. We're also the world leader in natural gas liquefaction equipment. So what that enables us to do is provide equipment so that natural gas can be transported from where it is to where it's needed in a very effective way. We make high purity processed gases and cleaning agents for photovoltaics and solar cells. It's a very important area for us as well. And then back to hydrogen, we're building a hydrogen fueling infrastructure globally. We've got 120 fueling stations in 16 countries. And now we're looking at compressionless fueling stations being launched later this year. So that'll also save energy and make it available. And finally, something closely related to Tony, we're working on a project in the UK to gasify waste. So it uses plasma arcs to destroy waste. It's a very unique project. We're very hopeful that it'll go forward. It'll generate about 50 megawatts of renewable energy, which is enough to heat up to 50,000 homes. So we're not quite close to you, but it'll be a very good benefit for the neighborhood where it's going to be located. So just in conclusion, sustainability has been a journey for Air Products. We're still on this journey. We're still moving from that risk management phase into really the commercial development and opportunities phase. But we really feel like we're trying to make our customers and our employees and our facilities and company more sustainable. And I think we can turn this off.
Yes. And Carl.
Okay, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I have no slides, so you can close your eyes or keep them open. Listen to I'll tell a little story. Essentially what I tried to do, I guess when Rob asked to be on this panel, how sustainability and engineering sustainability in a global environment, I thought, well, what I'd like to do is tell the J&J story from how sustainability aligns with our core values and the leadership required to make that happen in a global environment, in a decentralized world as Johnson & Johnson exists. And the story I'll tell is a lot of personal reflections, but it builds upon what both Tony and Julia both mentioned today. When I graduated from Villanova in '78, sustainability wasn't really a word back then. It was all about environmental reductions and waste minimization. And when I got out of school, I went to work for a local engineering company in the Philadelphia area, and I wanted to do three things. I wanted to work at a place where I could make a difference. I want to work with cross-functional teams to provide the best product or solution available. And I always wanted to do the right thing. And what I found through the course of my career, when you talk to management gurus and pundits and consultants, they call this kind of working with your head, heart, and guts aligned. And I'll come back to that in a minute, how those core values are really important to sustainability and making a difference. So I've been with Johnson & Johnson for 25 years. When I first started out, I was fortunate enough to help develop their first set of pollution prevention goals. back in the late 80s. We focused on things like toxic reduction emissions and hazardous waste minimization. And it was really cool back then to set up recycling programs. And we thought we were making a difference. But it was all about reducing our impact and having a zero impact. And I remember one of my colleagues back at the time we were putting the goals and targets together, he said, well, who wants to get up in the morning and say, I'm having a zero impact at work? So that's kind of an interesting point of view. He says, isn't there something more that we should be reaching out for? And how can we align that with the corporate credo and values of Johnson & Johnson? So we start talking about moving beyond the environmental goals and targets to working around the social area and looking at the economic value of having goals in place that help both the top and bottom line. So we looked at areas around more than philanthropic, but building capability wherever we had a community or wherever we had a facility in a community around providing access to drinking water or making sure there were recycling programs in place for the local employees and the communities. Designing products and services that not only had a reduced impact, but a positive impact. Reuse of materials in our packaging, eliminating packaging. And started thinking of this holistically as it becomes a core business strategy. So as I mentioned, over the next 20 years, we moved from pollution prevention to next generation goals to what we called healthy people, healthy planet goals. We've just embarked upon another set of goals, building on that, a healthy future. Essentially, it's built on the premise that the health and wellness of the environment has a direct impact on the health and wellness of society. If you think about health impacts from global warming, CO2, the rise of infectious disease around the world, they're only a plane ride away from making it to the US. How can we help come up with products and services and strategies that will make a difference in this triple bottom line world of sustainability? So we aligned it with our J&J credo, which was developed about 60 years ago by our president at the time, General Johnson. And essentially, it talks about our core responsibilities in four key areas. Our responsibilities to customers and patients, providing products and services that meet their needs, healthcare needs. It talks about treating employees with respect and dignity all over the world. It talks about providing value and having respect for the community environment in which we work and live. And finally, it talks about providing a fair profit for our shareholders. And that, by design, comes last. Because the theory is if you pay attention to the first three responsibilities, the profits will come. And over the past 60 years, we've had a pretty successful model where that has worked. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, with a corporation the size of Johnson & Johnson, we have over 122,000 employees, over 175 operating companies as of this week. It changes every week, in 72 countries in the world. To have everybody marching to the beat of the same drummer, those same set of core values, customer and patients, employees, community environment, and shareholders, there's going to be a few hiccups. And recently, as you're probably aware, we've had some mistakes, where we've had some missteps in a very small piece of our business. But being a leader means that you admit to those mistakes, you get back on track with the core values that got you there in the first place. So one of the things that we've done, and it just didn't start recently, but we've had a process in place for our leaders to make better decisions from a sustainable perspective. We call it our global leadership profile. And I'd like to share with you some of these attributes or competencies that we talk about all the time with our leaders. And it's managing in this world of paradox. I think General Zinni did a great job this afternoon talking about very rarely are issues or situations black or white. They're often gray. So a lot of the issues that we face, innovation versus standardization, top line growth versus cost improvement. At many times it seems like they're at odds with one another. Looking at global coordination versus local responsiveness. Having global standards for the world, but implementing locally where it can best make them the best difference. Having centralized functions in a decentralized environment like Johnson & Johnson. So these are many tough decisions that rarely are they, as I said, black or white. But how do we do, and I'll share with you three kind of key attributes or competencies from a leadership perspective that we try to ingrain all the time. The first one is having a big picture orientation with attention to detail. I call this managing the business with a telescope and a microscope. Tony, you mentioned this. There is so much pressure on corporations and business today to manage for the short term, the next quarter's profits, the earnings reports, for Wall Street, meeting all the forecasts and projections. It's a very tough job. At the same time, you can't take your eye off the ball on that long term, that telescope. What are your strategies in place to achieve that long desired vision or future that you've projected? So it's having this telescope and microscope, the big picture perspective with attention to detail. General Zinni mentioned a question we often ask, what's the bigger picture? What are the second and third order impacts that we need to think about from a leadership perspective that might not be the right answer today, but will be the right answer in 2 to 3, 4 years down the road? Sustainability is all about the long term and creating that environment for success. Another attribute or competency that we talk about is tolerance for ambiguity. And by this I mean it's being able to see the world of possibilities, but not knowing how to get to that end state, but seeing the bigger picture of possibilities and breakthrough, innovation. So as I mentioned, rarely are issues black or white, they're typically in the gray zone. And when you make decisions on many different topics that come up, you're often forced with what's either this solution or that solution. I can tell you as my career, I've benefited from having an engineering background where I've been trained to assess the situation, develop different alternatives that will come up to meet the intended outcomes, implement and pilot options and alternatives, and finally measuring those chosen solutions to see if they meet the intended path and outcome. So that rigorous process of assess, develop, implement, measure really help us get a better handle on this tolerance for ambiguity. Sometimes I call it like sculpting fog. Being able to go down the path and find out how can we meet this objective when we don't really have a clear path of how to get there. The last attribute that I'll talk about from a leadership perspective is the idea of self-awareness. The big term, I guess, a concept for many years has been emotional intelligence. As a leader, you need to be self-aware and to always have your radar on how others are perceiving you in your workplace, with your direct reports, even with those that don't report into you, but those that you work with on teams and across the world in different cultures. It's by self-aware, I mean you're willing to learn from others and also knowing when to lead. It's being the player coach. Certain times you're a player on the team, other times you're the coach on the team, or a trainer on the team. It's looking at this concept that I think Lincoln used, the novel, having a team of enemies, surrounding yourself with diverse perspectives and points of view to really understand, especially when you move out of the U.S. and into some of the emerging markets. The U.S.-centric point of view won't get you very far or in a very efficient manner. I couldn't agree more with General Zinni at his keynote address. Understand different perspectives. I always go back to Stephen Covey, one of his 7 habits that we talk about a lot, and it's really paid out. I've really learned from it. It's called seek first to understand, then be understood. Put yourselves in the shoes of your customers, your suppliers, your employees around the world and get a different perspective on what success looks like. That will truly help you come up with sustainable solutions for the long term. I'll close here with a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald, the noted novelist from the 30s and 40s. And I thought it was pretty apropos, leading in this world of change and paradox. He said, the test of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in one's head at the same time and still retain the ability to function. I guess it's kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time, and trying to do that little paraphrase. But that's so true in this swirling world today that we have of changing conditions, a marketplace, transparency, incredible demands. You really need to have this combination of heart, head, and guts. And by that I mean being able to lead with a clear purpose, direction, and values, leading with your heart, understanding, coaching, and developing a diverse workforce. And finally, leading with guts, having the courage to do the right thing in a changing and paradoxical world. So that's my take on sustainability.
Well, thank you. I mean, I want to thank all 3 of you. First of all, you've destroyed all my questions. You've already answered half of them. And so we will be going to the audience here in a few minutes. Hopefully you can engage with us. But I have one question. I've heard a lot today about how much we've learned from dealing overseas or in the globalization economy. What has that done to help you change your domestic operations? Is there any lessons from working overseas that you can bring back to your operations in the U.S.?
I'll jump in real quick. The idea of leapfrog technology. Often when you're designing new products for the marketplace, you want to have all the bells and whistles and latest features. But when it comes today in it's a constantly changing environment, we're finding developing products in India and China where we don't have all the bells and whistles, but it meets basic needs, and it's often more affordable for lower tiers of the pyramid. It's a fantastic way to innovate and actually leapfrog that and bring it back to the States. It actually helps improve our cost structure. So this idea of leapfrogging, not all the great ideas come from the U.S. In fact, many of them come from outside our marketplace.
Yeah, I would certainly second that. And if you're not learning from both international, domestic, and all the operations that you have, you're not going to be a very sustainable organization because it's all about learning and getting better at what you do. But there's so many examples. I just give you one quick one. We have 2 construction projects going on in China today, one in the U.S. and one in Europe. And our 2 projects in the U.S. and the Europe have schedules of approximately 40 months. We're building basically the same plant in 24 months in China. Well, how can they do that? Yes, they have different labor efficiencies and different labor costs, but we sure better figure out how we can build facilities that fast and at the costs that they're doing it. So, I mean, there's just, and you could go on and on and on with examples, and hopefully as an organization, you know, it's all about that sharing and having that open mind to say, what are you doing differently than we're doing? How can we both learn from that and ultimately get better?
Yeah, and we have similar examples too, but I think your last point is the key, which is sharing those best practices worldwide, learning what you can from other folks, taking advantage of the diversity, the way they look at problems differently, and then bringing that back to make the whole organization better.
All right. I have a question. I mean, General Zinni was talking about engineers. I think he was trying to make a joke there at one point. And we have obviously 3 people who are leaders and are also engineers. What from your engineering background helps you in your current work that you're doing?
Well,
Hopefully something.
Yeah.
You already answered
Yes,
this
you
question.
did.
Yeah.
So,
And I really do think it a lot that the
Yeah,
answer that you
it's a
gave
great
is
answer.
it's that analytical process. I mentioned, you know, in my prepared remarks, the discipline, you know, and that constant cycle of evaluating how you're doing and assessing, and just really looking at problems and seeking solutions. So I think that's kind of just a fundamental of whatever engineering discipline that you've got as an educational background.
it's definitely a big help. I think, though, where at least my industry is challenged, and even around the concept of sustainability, is what we do is complex. So how do you explain the chemical industry, waste to energy to your neighbor? How do you teach a plant person to explain that to their neighbor, to be an ambassador for the company? So the analytical skills absolutely help, but sometimes the challenge becomes sharing that information out to the public and your stakeholders.
And certainly one of the things that we know Villanova for is the values that you learn when you you know, go to school here and get a degree. It's not just about, you know, the engineering per se or the business. It's about the values. And I think when you really look at sustainability, you know, it's really that being able to stay centered on what your values are. I think when we look at how you can run an organization or, you know, be a leader within an organization, you know, those values that you learn, you know, both from your family but as well as your education are just essential.
Okay. And next one is going to be you after this one, so start thinking back there. One question I did have is, you know, values are different in different parts of the world. Like some area might not be as concerned about getting rid of their waste product. How do you deal in countries where the ethics, I guess, or they're not really that concerned about some of the sustainability issues?
Yeah.
Or do you?
Yeah, we do. We have a global environmental health and safety management system. We implement it globally, doesn't matter where the facilities are in the world, and it covers about 200 different standards, everything from employee safety, process safety, environmental. But we implement those same standards regardless of where we put our facilities, and we expect everyone in our company, as well as other folks in our supply chain, to abide by our code of conduct. So we put global systems in place and track against them.
It's a big challenge. It really is. You know, we think a certain way. We think about certain values. We have training, whether it's on Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and you have training, and no matter how many times you say it, their culture is different, and they think something is right when we would say, my gosh, you can't possibly think about doing that. We have our reputation to protect, or environmental matters. I mean, without naming any specific countries, I mean, there are some big challenges there. Having said that, I think as you continue to work that process and work those relationships, and you have to be present, you have to be ready to stand up and say, I'm ready to give up the business if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you I've done that a couple of times. And really pressure, but the people, I think at the end of the day, they will respond and respect that as long as you're consistent in your message, and you say that this is how we have to do business. There's benefits of partnering with an American company. And I'm talking about joint ventures, so it's even more difficult than when you're working and it's your company and you say it's my way or the highway. This is a joint venture where we're a minority partner with a majority in a state-owned company in China. How do you bring your values and cultures into that? It is difficult. It takes time. It takes relationship building. You have to be there. I've actually got tomorrow. I've got my partner from China is going to be here. He visits the U.S. I have to go to China. You have to be there and have that communication. So it's not easy though.
I mean, I'll just chime in. I couldn't agree more with both your answers. I mean, in certain parts of the world, we have global standards as well that supersede many local country regulations, where it's perfectly acceptable to dump raw sewage into a ditch on the side of the road outside your factory. I mean, that's quite a normal practice. That's not the way we want to operate according to our global standards. But it's also working with the local governments to help them understand the beneficial value of having secondary treatment, tertiary treatment, as opposed to raw sewage, and the health impacts that can come from that. So it takes a while to journey working with the local governments as well.
Yeah. And I do think that these countries are, they're moving very rapidly up that environmental scale. It is not like they don't want to get there. It just is going to take time. It took this country time to get there. It's going to take time, but they're moving very rapidly to enhance, environmental performance of local facilities.